So 15 years ago today, I had endured my first week in a minimum security camp, and the experience was nothing like I had envisioned. Indeed, after I surrendered, my lawyers told me what the experience would be like. And because I didn't know anyone that had traversed the system, I believed them. And then I got there and I was stunned and surprised at how so many of these good men in federal prison were adjusting. So what I want to do in this live video is share what I perceive to be some harsh realities about life in a minimum security camp. So if you are traversing this criminal justice system, you'll be more prepared and you can assess how you want to get through this journey. And I will admit that some of the things that I convey, they're upsetting to people. Indeed, when I was working on a daily blog in prison, the lion's share of the letters that I received at mail call were positive, but every now and again people would go apoplectic and crazy as a result of what federal prisoners were allowed to do, all day. And as I'll convey, I hope in this video, too many prisoners do not take advantage of the opportunities given to them. So let's immediately debunk the misperception that there's violence in a minimum security camp. Whatever we see sensationalized on television or through Cool Hand Luke, Shawshank Redemption is simply sensationalized on television, is not rooted in reality of what you will endure in a minimum security camp. I saw a little bit of violence, some fights, only because someone acted like a total fool and imbecile and did things that should lead to getting fight, like immediately surrendering to prison, offering unsolicited advice, getting involved in other people's conversations, speaking to guards because they don't identify with the prisoner. So if you act like a fool in prison, even in a minimum security camp, of course you're going to get beat up. If you gamble and you don't pay the debt, of course you're going to get beat up. But guess what? You'll get beat up in Beverly Hills or any fine town in America if you don't pay a gambling debt. So if presuming you adjust with a brain and you have an understanding of what you're striving to do, there's going to be no violence there. The harshest reality is the experience for most people can be incredibly boring. It can be. It doesn't have to be. Now, when I surrendered to federal prison, I saw men wasting their days away. Indeed, let me walk you through a day of my journey, 1 week. So it was Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, 2008. Here was one day. I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would go to the private room and work and write and think for a while. I'd read, write, think. I would go to the chow hall at 6 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock in the morning. I would come up. I would go change and exercise for a couple of hours. I would go to the kitchen to do my job for an hour or an hour and a half. I would then go exercise again for several hours. I would go do my job in the kitchen at 5 or 6 o'clock. Then I'd go to bed at 7:30. Think about that day that I just described to you. Was it productive? Was it really helping me prepare for the inevitable obstacles that awaited my life as a convicted felon? Other than a little bit of reading and writing in the morning, not really. I adjusted to federal prison in a way to avoid the inevitable boredom. The harsh reality is the biggest and highest value in a minimum security camp is boredom. And the lion's share of people find ways to overcome this boredom, and they don't really create tasks or create skills or engage their community and develop a new network that helps them overcome the inevitable obstacles that await all convicted felons on the other side. So the reason that some people get upset and the reason that victims occasionally will reach out to me, not victims of mine, all victims have been paid back. My victim was the government, the IRS. But the reason that some victims will reach out to me is because they are disgusted at the way that some prisoners can serve time. Hence, we buy into this country club mantra of the bocce ball court, the pickleball, the track, the opportunities that people have, and it makes them frustrated to the point where they say, I can't believe this person could write a blog or manage a website or do anything productive. I'm here working 3 jobs to overcome the bad decisions, not my own bad decisions, the person who victimized me. How is this fair? Now, I will say to those victims who call, at least that person is being productive. At least the person that took advantage of you, as terrible as that is being productive and making the most of the experience. What's tragic, both for victims and the family of prisoners, follows. When this person has 18 or 19 hours, absolutely nothing. And that's the harshest reality of life in a minimum security camp, which is why some men will feel like a year and a day sentence or 2 years in a lonely minimum security camp. Excuse me as my phone is blowing up here. This is what happens when you go live. In a minimum security camp, men will feel like 2 years is 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. Because let's look at some of the ways that some men serve time. They'll wake up at 6 o'clock, go to the chow, and they will then watch TV till 3 o'clock. And yes, there have been some incentives with the passing of the First Step Act, which enables prisoners to participate in programming and get up to a year off their sentence. But it doesn't change that people are still able to waste their days away in endless fun in table games. And the highlight of their week is the softball practice and practicing 4 days a week inside of a minimum security camp, overcoming the inevitable boredom. It's the reason some men who don't need to work will work. And let me say that again. There are some men who need to rebuild and they're coming home with nothing. They've lost it all. They'll find a mindless job for 9 hours that helps them feel like they're not in prison. Why? Only to overcome the inevitable boredom. But what happens is life on the other side is harder. They call home and they complain. They make it seem as if their experience is more difficult. Then they get off the phone, they go play table games and dominoes. And frankly, many of them have the time of their life because they have got to find a way to overcome the inevitable boredom. So if you are going to federal prison, and I empathize with you, I want to share with all of you, there ain't no violence unless you act like a fool or an imbecile. You've got to create a plan that helps you overcome the inevitable boredom. Strategies to include writing for 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes a day. Behind me in my office is my journal that I wrote in every single day, and I would write out my goals and I would try to implement them. Exercising and dosages you can maintain when you can come home. Now, I know the problem in federal prison, it's very difficult at times to even get going. So you surrender to prison and the reality of this sets in. I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. You've got to be kidding me. And then you think about everything you need to accomplish: reputation, build a new career, prove worthy of the love support of your family. It's brutal. And because it's so overwhelming, some people don't know where to start. Then they buy into the mistaken presumption or the ad hominem that because I'm a felon, there's nothing coming my way. So they never start, they're bored, and then they just find things that are fun to overcome it. Before I transition to the next harsh reality, I never played table games or softball in prison, in part because I wasn't going to be a professional softball player when I came home. And I actually shared that story with my wife on our first date many, many years ago. And she said, that sounds really kind of arrogant and it sounds very pretentious. And I said, maybe it is. But I knew I could run around that dusty dirt track and not get hurt. And I knew if I was beholden to 4 soccer or softball practices a week, it was getting me further away from being able to take a beautiful woman like you to dinner because I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. If you are going to prison, find a strategy to ensure you overcome the inevitable boredom. And that includes focusing on what you can and cannot control. You might not be able to control if the email goes down. You can't control perhaps your bunk or your job, your bunkie when you visit. Can't control these things. All you can control is what you do. And you have so much time, which is part of the reason some victims go apoplectic when they realize how much time prisoners have. A second thing that you should all embrace if you're going to federal prison is, I'll tell you, man, it's a hopeless environment. It is a hopeless environment. And everyone who goes to prison says they're going to have these goals and they're going to follow through. And then the second they get there are people that are dissuading them and telling them that their efforts won't matter. And no one will hire them. And slow down. Why are you reading? Why are you writing? Why are you preparing? Ain't nothing coming your way because you're a felon. Forget about your family. Let them serve time and you serve your time. And the problem is there are so many people who are so easily influenced. Indeed, it's part of the reason they're involved in the criminal justice system to begin with. And I know so many of you who will eventually watch this video didn't wake with bad intentions, didn't go into business to create a fraud and hurt people. Oftentimes you were swept into it. And even though your role might have been more tangential, it doesn't change that you're standing for count in federal prison. So perhaps the prison term provides you an opportunity to introspect and look inward and recognize, what are my tendencies? If it's easily being influenced by other people, you're going to have a tough time in federal prison. That's the harsh reality because they are going to bring you down. And I began to get that when I was in federal prison. Once I got my shtick together and I was up and writing and reading for several hours and exercising in shorter dosages, and I would really speak to no one. Indeed, people said I was aloof, a little standoffish. I wasn't. I was just tunnel vision in my own world because I was so damn scared to go home at 33 and the felony conviction and the Great Recession. I wasn't aloof. I was focused. I would not let them get to me. And here's the beauty of being in federal prison and have nothing left and starting over. Here's the beauty of it. You have nothing left. So if you try something and it doesn't fail, you're right back to where you are right now. You have nothing. So you might as well try to do things that are bold and innovative, whether it's a book or a blog, in teaching, building your release plan, doing really exciting things. And guess what? Again, I'll say it again, if it fails, you're right back to where you are right now. Nowhere. You're in federal prison, but by starting and learning, you know where to pivot. Part of the reason it is such a negative and hopeless environment, besides prisoners influencing other prisoners to not take action, even if a prisoner is not influenced, too many prisoners will obsess and ruminate all day about the life they had. So I recall this in the library. Men would sit there and they would just sit here like this, and it was heartbreaking. They would just sit there for hours thinking about the life they had and where they are now. And then if they're not thinking about the life they had, they're thinking about what they wish life could be like in the future, and then they're dreaming. And then what they're not doing is living in the present right now. So if you're just continually living in the past and thinking about what you had and obsessing or hoping for what you wish to have, and you're not taking measurable action at this moment, prison will be boring and you will feel hopeless because you're not doing anything, you're not taking any measurable action. There's nothing of substance that you can share with your community or your case manager or a potential employer or probation officer. It's part of the reason, here's a harsh reality, it's part of the reason some prisoners turn down the halfway house. Imagine, you know what everyone wants when you go to prison? The first goal? I want to get out. The first time anyone calls our team, I got 37 months, how quickly can I be out? I got 4 years, how quickly can I be out? With RDAP, the First Step Act, it is an utter like obsession. And then it's like, as the cliche holds, be careful what you wish for. You approach the end of your term, you've wasted away the term with table games and softball, boredom, the gambling, the TV. You haven't done anything to prepare for the future. You think about the past or the future, what you'd like it to be like. Then you realize there's trouble for me on the other side. And guess what happens? Your 2 years is a life sentence. Your 4 years is a life sentence. That's when you turn down visits with the wife because you don't want to talk about how you're going to sustain yourself and a family when you come home. That's prison. That's the negativity that follows inaction, living a life of boredom and not recognizing at some point this will end. And it's ending. The question is, what does life look like on the other side? The last harsh reality I want to convey in this video is the unwillingness of prison. And I want to be clear, when I do a YouTube video that is somewhat general in nature, I'm not indicting anyone. Indeed, when I came home from prison, I gave my first lecture in front of 2,000 people in Jonesboro, Arkansas. I said something like, anyone can make bad decisions that went to prison. And some huge dude in the back row stood up and like, hey man, I know you're in from California. I think you just landed, but don't insinuate that I can make bad decisions that sent me to jail. I'm not you. And you know what? While humbling, he was right. So I'm not indicting any of you. You may go to prison and have the greatest prison term history of prison terms, but I know some of you are concerned. You can be influenced. You fear the boredom and you fear there is no future because of your felony conviction. So I am speaking to you because I saw so many of you on the wrong side of prison boundaries. My friends with whom I worked in the kitchen and walked the track and saw on visitation, hopeless and depressed and forlorn about what their future looked like. So I am speaking to you. So don't leave a hate message like, hey, I'm perfect. You may be perfect. Many of you want to do better. So while in this environment, too many prisoners, there is an inability to accept responsibility. Too many people will sit around and walk that track and say, I got a raw deal. It was the judge. It was the lawyer. I know some of you shouldn't be there. And I know some of you didn't have bad intentions. And I know many of you don't like your lawyer and don't agree with the prison term. And you don't agree with your plea agreement. I understand it, but you're there. And the first step of overcoming this process is embracing the reality that you are in federal prison. There was some breakdown, some fracture that led you there. And when you can get there, when you can self-examine and introspect and think and understand what led you to this prison, that's when things really begin to open up for you. But too many prisoners are unable to do that. You want to know why? It really requires work. It's hard. So if you're unwilling to look into the future, or you convince yourself that there's no real future for you because you're a convicted felon, or if you're going to do what so many people do, my buddy's going to hire me, my friend has a business, my brother's going to hire me. If you want to kind of feel like someone's going to owe you a job. I didn't want that. My brother had a huge business I could have gone to work for. I'd have gone to Taco Bell or scrub toilets before I took a favor as a gift. I didn't want it. I wanted to earn it. So you may go down that path. That's fine. I served time with a guy in prison who loved to say, hey, dude, I got a PhD. Parents have dough. A guy like that, watch TV all day, watch the Kardashians and Sons of Anarchy, play softball, play bocce ball. He was the head tennis, won tennis championship. Awesome. Parents have dough. Terrible way to live life, waiting for your parents to die, asking for the handout. I didn't want it. I didn't want it, nor should you. So you've got to find the time to understand how the hell you got here. And how can you do that? You need to read literature. You need to read good books and understand how you got here. Write book reports, share them with your family, share them with your probation officer, share them with a potential employer. Only by reading and writing and thinking and growing and sharing it can you ensure that you're not bored, will you not feel like you are in a brutal, hopeless, negative environment, and you will finally begin to feel productive, because even though you are in prison, you are finding a way to contribute to the world by sharing content that you are creating. And it's another harsh reality that sometimes people become so fixated and focused on themselves, they forget about the reality that the lion's share of people inside of that minimum security camp had it measurably worse than them. They will talk about how their own life is imploding, how they got screwed, and they complain and they make matters more difficult. And other prisoners watch and hear this and think, God, I wish I could be this guy. I wish I had it as good as this guy. Does this guy not appreciate that his wife comes like every week? He's got 2 children that come to see him. God, he has like $500 a month in commissary coming in. God, I work 7 jobs. I do laundry for 3 guys. I do this guy's sheets, right? I do 4 jobs. I scrub the toilets and kitchen. I do that guy's job in agriculture. So I do 7 jobs. I have $50 a month come in. God, I would do anything to be him. I would do anything to be it. My friend David in prison used to say that. He used to say, "Why all you white collar guys complain so much? You got it better than me, man. What's wrong with you? Don't you appreciate anything?" I said, I don't feel that way. Don't indict me. Don't say I didn't say that." He said, "I know, but a lot of y'all think that." So I want to convey to you, most of the dudes inside of that federal prison, or females if you're going there, have it worse than you. Look inward, be grateful and appreciative for all you have left rather than all that you have lost. And if you can do that, you won't be bored. It won't be a hopeless environment, and you will ensure this experience will not become a life sentence, as it is for so many people. That's how I'm going to wrap up this live YouTube video on Friday. I'm very grateful that all of you are here and watching. And this is how I will close. This experience is ending. 20% of the 1,000 people a month that reach out to White Collar Advice are home. And the lion's share of them who are home are struggling. They don't know what to do next. And when I ask why they don't know what to do next, all we have to do is reverse engineer how they served time in prison. They were bored. It was a hopeless environment. They got a raw deal, a lot of table games, a lot of soccer, great pickleball player. That's awesome. Pickleball don't pay the bills. I don't care how entitled or pretentious that sounds. Being a great softball player, it don't pay the bills. And if you are that person that's rich and doesn't need to work and you have life experiences, this is how I'll close. Contribute to your brothers inside of that prison. Teach and inspire and give back. Just don't sit around all day complaining and bitching. Do better, give back and inspire. You've had experiences so many of these prisoners can learn from. So I'm going to wrap it up. I think I may do this again next Friday. Don't know what the topic is. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.